We're going to begin topic 1.2, the elements of life, and this lesson is going to talk a lot about cycling of matter. So we're going to still be talking about biological molecules, but we're going to see more about where those atoms and molecules come from in the environment, how they enter producers, and how they cycle through the rest of the heterotrophs, and then how that matter is continually cycled. So we're going to look very quickly at the structure of different macromolecules so we can see what elements are in each one. And then we're going to look at the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle and the phosphorus cycle so we can see how those elements and how those molecules are cycled through the ecosystem. So let's do a quick review of macromolecules. What we see here first, right here, are carbohydrates. So you can see glucose and fructose. Those are both monosaccharides. They're going through a dehydration or a synthesis reaction where water is lost and then they form a disaccharide down at the bottom. Those carbohydrates are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. We're going to talk about those a little bit more in upcoming lessons, but we're always going to see carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in carbohydrates. To the right of that, in purple, you can see an amino acid. Amino acid are the monomers of proteins. And notice that we still have carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, but now we have nitrogen. So that is one thing that you guys should know, is that all amino acids that make up proteins have nitrogen. To the bottom, in white, you can see cholesterol. Cholesterol is a type of lipid. Lipids are mainly made up of hydrocarbons, but you can also see there's a little oxygen attached to that cholesterol down at the bottom on that alcohol group. So we still have carbon and hydrogen that makes up the majority of lipids, but once in a while they'll have an oxygen too. And then our last image down in the bottom right, that is a nucleotide. They're going to have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They're also going to have nitrogen because of that nitrogenous base. That nitrogenous base in yellow right there, that's showing something that is a pyrimidine. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later in the week, how you could figure out if something's a pyrimidine or a purine. But there's one ring there, so I know it's a pyrimidine. But there's a nitrogen in that base. So our nitrogenous bases are adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, but they all have nitrogen. And then the main thing that you need to know too is that that phosphate group, see that phosphorus right there? Nucleotides are always going to have phosphorus. So DNA and RNA will have that as well. So here's a brief recap of all of those elements that we talked about. Oxygens in all biological molecules, carbons in all biological molecules, hydrogens in all biological molecules, but nitrogen's one that you're going to want to pay attention to, because you should know that nitrogen is in proteins and also in nucleic acids. Those four make up the vast majority of biological molecules, those elements. But calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur are also in biological molecules, but just in a lower percentage. I want you guys to focus on phosphorus, knowing that phosphorus is in nucleic acids because of the phosphate group. I also want you to know that phosphorus is in phospholipids, because we're going to talk about the cell membrane, and the fact that phosphorus has a charge is important when we start talking about the composition of the cell membrane.